With Kingdom Hearts 3 just around the corner and everyone's excitement, including mine, reaching a fever pitch, now is as good a time as any to take a quick look back at the series and see how the games stack up. I'll be ranking every game in the series from worst to best based on their story, gameplay, and overall impact on the series. Plus, when KH3 finally comes out on January 29th, you can definitely expect to see a review on this channel soon after, so subscribe if you're interested. Anyway, before we start the countdown, I'm just gonna let you know that I won't be including any of the movies on this list because I don't really have a lot to say about them, and I also can't get footage of the DS games they're based on. So that means that even though they are on the PS4 Story So Far collection, I won't be placing Recoded, 358 Over 2 Days, or Back Cover on this list. However, I will say I really enjoyed Recoded, as pointless and forgettable as it really was, just for the platforming and combat. I also recall enjoying 358 Over 2 Days for the story, but I wasn't as big a fan of the gameplay due to the more rigid mission structure. Neither is really all that amazing, nor are they super important to the overarching story, but they're fun enough little games on DS. Anyway, enough of all that, we are going to start the list now with number 6, 0.2 Fragmentary Passage. This short game starring Aqua is last basically by default. It's more of an extended demo for Kingdom Hearts 3 rather than its own game, and in that regard it does its job really well. It showcases the new engine and gives players a much anticipated sneak peek at Kingdom Hearts 3, but the fact of the matter is that this is a 2-hour demo going up against full games. I enjoyed Fragmentary Passage overall for its movement system and awesome trippy environments, and the blessed return of the command menu system. Thank you for rescuing us from the command deck. More on that particular point later. Fun though the game is, the story feels unimportant since it's mostly just Aqua putzing around the Realm of Darkness and painfully shoehorning herself into the main story wherever she can. Thank God we now know why Mickey didn't have a shirt at the end of KH1. The greatest mystery of the series has finally been solved. My other issue is that the combat is very limited and still a little too floaty for my liking. As a preview of KH3, it's great, but as a game in its own right, well, it's 2 hours long and doesn't really do a whole lot in that time. Number 5, Re-Chain of Memories. I never played the Game Boy original, but like a lot of people, I wrote it off at the time as some spin-off that I didn't need to pay attention to. I was 10, okay? So imagine my surprise when I boot up Kingdom Hearts 2 the next year and have absolutely no idea what's going on. Turns out that Game Boy game was a direct sequel to Kingdom Hearts 1 and provided a lot of much-needed context for the beginning of KH2. I didn't get around to actually playing it until pretty recently, and now that I've done that, I can safely say that I still don't entirely get it, but at least I know what all that stuff in the opening cinematic of KH2 is about, and also why Organization 13 only appears to have 8 members. I was always confused about that as a kid. Chain of Memories is an interesting case because it tried something different, it wasn't entirely successful, and the series has pretty much abandoned every single feature that Chain of Memories implemented. I mean, Birth by Sleep introduced the command deck, command styles, shot locks, D-links, air dashing, all things that would or will make appearances in later games, for better and for worse, but the only thing that ended up sticking from Chain of Memories was multiple playable characters, which is a good feature. Hell, even the story of Chain of Memories feels kind of inconsequential, since almost every character involved is either dead by the end or doesn't remember any of it. And the few who do remember never bring it up. I guess Riku and Axel remember, but Riku's barely involved in KH2 until the very end of the game, and it's not like either of them ever fill Sora in on what went on in Castle Oblivion. The context that this game provides for KH2 really only mattered for the first couple hours, and it doesn't end up meaning a whole lot by the end. The whole game is kind of forgettable, which, I guess is appropriate given the nature of the story, and the card battle system, while a neat idea and a smart way to make use of the Game Boy Advance's limited hardware, just feels kind of unnecessary and not very well balanced when playing on PS4. My problem with battles in Re-Chain of Memories is having to divide my attention between too many things at once. This probably wasn't an issue on the Game Boy's tiny screen, but navigating a 3D arena full of enemies while looking at my deck of cards on the bottom left and having to see what cards the enemy's playing on the bottom center of the screen, while dodging attacks, stacking cards, scrolling through my deck, and making sure not to miss too many attacks lest I have to reload again, well, there's just a little too much going on at once. Now, I realize that this could also be said to some extent for the good combat systems in the Kingdom Hearts series. That there's a lot to pay attention to and manage at once, especially on higher difficulties, but There's a reason why I think it works in KH2 and not as much here in Chain of Memories. The main thing is that countering enemy attacks in a game like KH2 is usually a matter of a single button press to block, cast Reflect, jump, or dodge roll out of the way, while countering an enemy in Chain of Memories can easily take a lot more button presses to scroll through your deck, but it's also not nearly as satisfying since it's just a matter of hitting a number with a higher number. In KH2, you've got to decide which of your options will work the best. In Chain of Memories, it's just, find the bigger number. While I'm always willing to give Kingdom Hearts credit for trying new things don't always work out, and I think Chain of Memories was an interesting experiment, but overall not a super successful one. Number 4, Birth by Sleep. I'm gonna guess here that I just lost a large portion of the Kingdom Hearts fans watching this video by having Birth by Sleep be this low on the list. But I'm not gonna sugarcoat it. I personally don't enjoy Birth by Sleep. And before you dislike and head to the comments to tell me why I'm an idiot, just hear me out. I have my reasons for not liking this game, but I fully understand why a lot of people do like it. In terms of the story, this is probably the most important one in the entire series, despite a lot of people probably assuming wrongly again that it was another spin-off or something when it was released for the PSP back in 2010. It's got a lot of other things going for it. I can see the appeal of a Kingdom Hearts game on the PSP, plus it had 3 playable characters, which was new at the time, and honestly, a lot of the stuff has really great designs. I personally think Aqua is one of the best character designs in the entire series. But there's a few things that I think make people give this game kind of a free pass despite all its flaws. One, it's again very heavily story-based, and plenty of people are mostly in this series for the story. That's not me, but I can respect that. And 2, a lot of its flaws get written off by people saying, well, it was a PSP game, so you can't be too hard on it. But with it now being on the PS4, that excuse doesn't really hold up anymore. Because Birth by Sleep's real problem is the gameplay. In fact, if we were ranking these purely on gameplay, Birth by Sleep would honestly be dead last for me. Among a few other things, BBS's main additions to the series were the command deck and slow, floaty Keyblade attacks. Nothing about this game's combat feels good. Ventus, the supposed fast character, has some crazy slow attack animations, and Aqua, the magic specialist, is really no better. And then there's Terra. Terra might be the worst thing this series has ever produced. His writing and characterization are awful, his voice acting is laughable.
Terra, I'm sorry.
The darkness, where did it come from?
I hate his slow and laggy movement, I hate his long, uncancelable attack animations, and I hate his big, dumb, stupid-looking pants. Every character has these two things in common: slow and floaty basic combos and a completely broken command deck system. Like every game in the series besides 1 and 2, BBS tried to reinvent the wheel somewhat, and this led to the command deck, a customizable list of powerful spells and combat moves that are based purely on cooldown. Now, Kingdom Hearts speedrunner and YouTuber Bloody Biscuits has a comprehensive video on the myriad of problems with the command deck system that you should probably just go and watch that if you want to know everything wrong with BBS, so I'll keep my thoughts here brief. Commands are completely overpowered, have basically no downside, and they completely break the game because basic Keyblade attacks are so slow and floaty that you might as well just spam commands the whole game. Just get a few cooldown reduction abilities and fill your deck with strong commands and you win. This is my problem with Birth by Sleep, and it's why I'm so happy to see the command menu back for Kingdom Hearts 3. The only real reason that this is above Chain of Memories is due to its impact on the series and story significance. The story of Birth by Sleep, like I said before, is pretty damn crucial to understanding the rest of the games. Now, that doesn't mean I think the plot is particularly good. The characters don't have any sort of depth beyond saying how good of friends they are without ever really showing it until the very end. And Xehanort is just so obviously evil that it makes everyone in the series seem like an idiot for not realizing it. And God, I just really hate Terra's pants. But the fact of the matter is, the events of the game explain a lot about the overarching series plot. I may not particularly enjoy it, but Birth by Sleep's impact on the series is undeniable, so it takes number 4. Also, I don't know where to include this, so I'm just gonna throw this in here.
The darkness.
Number 3, Dream Drop Distance. Dream drop distance, which I'm just gonna call 3D, is as high as it is on this list entirely due to one addition: flow motion. However, like a lot of features in this series, the idea is great, but the execution is very inconsistent. The large open environments allow for a lot of fun traversal, which is something I sorely missed in KH2. But it's kind of a double-edged sword because the big open worlds are fun to traverse, but they're also samey, barren, and oftentimes pretty confusing. Places like the Tron world spring immediately to mind. Plus, it's pretty overpowered in combat and very easily spammable, but the sheer fun of using flow motion for exploring and combat offsets a lot of these issues. The basic Keyblade combos are a little bit faster and less floaty than in Birth by Sleep, and it still uses the command deck, but it's been streamlined quite a bit, and commands like Balloon are only kind of overpowered, rather than Birth by Sleep's completely busted commands. Plus, it's pretty cool to be able to play as Sora and Riku and switch between them at any time, sometimes against your will, but whatever. So overall, compared to Birth by Sleep, some improvements have been made. 3D's real weakness is, well, everything else. This is where the series really went full feature overload. You've got flow motion, which is great, the reality shift system, which is basically just reaction commands, but a little more time-consuming and annoying, the dives, which are basically just KH1's gummy ship missions, but even longer and somehow, again, even more annoying, and of course, this. I'm sorry, did anyone ask for this? The weird Mario Party side game in Birth by Sleep just wasn't quite out of place enough for you, so you had to throw in Pokemon Nintendogs, which I guess is just Pokemon now? Collecting and training these little things has some very real combat benefits, but it's just so boring. You don't have to do it, but its inclusion is just kind of, why? The story of 3D is yet another direct sequel that everyone should really know by now is not a spin-off. We should really have gotten used to that, but somehow I wasn't. And it has very important plot elements. But I couldn't really tell you what any of those plot elements are, besides Riku and Sora taking their final exam to become Keyblade Masters, since apparently saving the world wasn't good enough. And Xehanort is back in multiple forms this time. Cool. Yeah, I don't really get this one in terms of story, and I was finding myself pretty uninterested in skipping through a lot of cutscenes in this one. What I can say is that it does set the stage nicely for an interesting story in Kingdom Hearts 3, but yeah, I ended up skipping a lot of this story. What can I say? I'm an impatient person, and I just wanted to get back to zipping around and wall jumping like Mega Man X. Number 2, Kingdom Hearts 1. It's pretty hard to beat the game that started it all. KH1 is more than a little obtuse at times. As a kid, it took me hours to get through Deep Jungle and Wonderland thanks to the horrible platforming controls and really confusing level design and total lack of any and all guidance, but KH1 makes up for this with some great combat and a story that, while it seemed complicated and weird at the time, is probably the simplest and most understandable plot in the entire series. You know, bad man Ansem wants to do bad thing, you are chosen one, stop bad man with magic key. There's twists and turns and plenty of stuff that makes no sense throughout, but the basic story beats are relatively straightforward. Relatively. The word I would use to describe KH1 is focused. While other games in the series add in unnecessary features like their lives depend on it, the original contains almost no fluff. Almost. Combat is mostly centered on the Keyblade combos and dodge rolling around, with magic and summons there to fill in the gaps, and your customization options are basically just your abilities and items. Nice and simple, no fiddling around for minutes on end in menus with melding commands and building new decks or playing with your weird Technicolor dream creatures. Just equip your stuff, play the game, and have fun. And sure, you can criticize the combat for being maybe too reliant on mashing X, but then I would say, well, is mashing triangle in BBS any better? At least when I hit a button in KH1, I can be reasonably certain that I'm not going to spend the next 5 minutes waiting for the animation to end before I can move again. If you give me the choice between BBS's highly customizable but overall stiff and unsatisfying combat, or KH1's focused, snappy, but not terribly complex combat, well, I think by now you know my answer. So, great combat, a relatively simple and coherent story, and, well, it started everything, so its impact on the series is basically unmatched. I really enjoy KH1, and sure, some of that might be nostalgia, but it's just a fun game. But you all saw it coming. The winner of this countdown is number 1, Kingdom Hearts 2. I know this isn't the hot take Maverick answer, but there's really no contest here for me. KH2 wins almost entirely thanks to its excellent combat. Best in the series by a country mile, and I could probably end the video there, but before I start raving about the combat, let's quickly cover the story. KH2 picks up with an, at the time, completely unknown character named Roxas, who spends the better part of almost 3 hours piddling around playing bad minigames before finding out, hey, sorry kid, your life is a lie and you don't exist anymore, tough break. Honestly, as much shit as this incredibly long and slow prologue gets, I think it really works, narratively and thematically. The excitement of finally getting to play as Sora is balanced with seeing this character we've spent the last few hours getting to know come to terms with the fact that his life has been a lie and that he's about to die. It's a genuinely emotional moment and one of my favorite scenes in the whole series.
Looks like my summer vacation is over.
After that, it's, pretty standard Kingdom Hearts. Go to all the Disney worlds, solve their problems, the overarching plot might pop its head in every now and then, and it all leads up to an epic final boss and what felt at the time like an appropriate end for the series. Yeah, crazy, right? Now, to address the common accusation that KH2 is just a mindless button masher, sure. On easy and normal, that's more or less true. And even on proud, that's kinda true still. Enemies do little enough damage that just mindlessly spamming Keyblade combos and using Cure when you get low enough will definitely get you through the lower difficulties. But where KH2 really shines is on proud and critical difficulties, and unless you're just in the series for the story, then I highly recommend playing on either one if you haven't before. The speed and responsiveness of KH2's controls really allow the game to push you to your limits on higher difficulties by requiring precise timing and smart use of all your available abilities. The slow controls in other games make high difficulties frustrating, like I know what I want my character to do, they're just too slow to do it. KH2 doesn't have that problem. The controls are spot on and Sora does exactly what you want every time. Reaction commands and limits, the things where you just mash triangle over and over, are pretty brainless, but the cinematic ones are at least fun to watch, and the ones that work within normal combat are super fun to use and have a ton of variety. I really have no serious complaints to make about KH2's combat, except maybe for the fact that it's really hard to figure out what summons do, and when it's smart to use them. They're not as immediately useful as magic or drive forms, so they kind of fall by the wayside pretty often. If anything, I would have liked if the game had a few more tutorials to explain more of the mechanics to new players, so they could really tap into the combat's amazing depth. But this could also be seen as a good thing, since the game is pretty easy to learn and get through just with basic combos and reaction commands for, young children or new players. But the higher difficulties require more mastery of the various systems at work in the combat for more experienced players on their second, third, or if you're like me, 9th or 10th playthrough of the game. Besides that, I found pretty much every combat option fun and satisfying to use, and the proud and critical difficulties strike a great balance between tough but fair challenge. I have one and only one major complaint with KH2, and that's the world design and environment traversal. It seems they heard players' complaints about the levels in KH1 being too confusing and the platforming being bad, and instead of improving these things, they just kinda threw them out. Most worlds are little more than a series of interconnected hallways with very little verticality and almost no opportunity for exploration. And the combat is completely gone, except for one late game area that wasn't even in the original game. The Cavern of Remembrance was only added later in the final mix version of the game. You get some fun movement abilities from leveling up your drive forms, which I love, but there's only one area where you actually need to use them. This is probably KH2's only weakness in comparison to the rest of the series. Going through the main story is generally a matter of walking to a room, fighting some enemies, watching a cutscene, rinse and repeat until the credits roll. But I don't really mind because the combat is just that fun. I've played this game more than any other in the series, probably close to 10 times all the way through, and I cannot recommend it highly enough. So there's my list. Do you agree, disagree? Let me know in the comments. Kingdom Hearts 3 is almost out, I'm real excited to play it, and you can expect a review sometime in the next month, I guess. Anyway, that's going to do it for this video. Thank you so much for watching. I'll see you next time.